Well, well, look at this. A series trying to romanticize London and gangs. And it's a series on top of that. It's almost as if they're trying to recreate the spectacle of a once great show that was destroyed before our very eyes. I wonder what series that is.
We're born into a certain world.
Now, on the topic of authenticity, I'll tell you this as somebody who lives in London. Gangs do not look like this in London. And they most definitely do not have massive skyscrapers under their arsenal. However, as I said before, they are most likely romanticizing the idea of gangs and, well, London. Perhaps the gangs in this have a bit more power, political power even, and with this are able to commence with operations, maybe even international operations around the world with various other organizations and syndicates. Again, very similar to a once great show that was destroyed before our very eyes. I wonder what show that is.
It's chosen for us.
Anyone else getting Peaky Blinders flashbacks? No? No one else? Just me?
Some might think it's brutal. No, me!
Now this is the part of it that interests me. The gritty realism of, well, dealing with your foes. Gangs often do things like this to make a point. Perhaps this is the equivalent of a beheading. Something that happened in a once great show that was destroyed before our very eyes. Do I need to keep harking on back to Game of Thrones and how similar this sounds and looks?
I say it's glorious.
On the topic of Game of Thrones, Sky was the channel or network that distributed it in the UK for HBO. So perhaps this is Sky saying to HBO, "Oi Yankee, watch us do it better than you." Perhaps this will actually be good, perhaps it will end well. And seeing as the only Gangs of London thing that I've seen in the past is a very, very mediocre video game from the early 2000s, the script seems to be unique and original. I'm intrigued, very intrigued. Perhaps they can actually pull it off better than HBO. But one thing I need to know is, who are the showrunners? I guess I'll get to that when I've finished.
Someone chose to kill Finn Wallace.
So let me get this straight. The main character, in quotation marks, is the leader of a major faction and then he gets killed, and I'm assuming that the son takes over as the de facto leader for the entire operation until he can find out who the killer is. This shows so many parallels to season 1 through 3 of Game of Thrones. Spoiler alert, when Eddard dies and his son, Robb Stark, has to lead an army to get revenge from the Lannisters, it goes pretty much the same way. You cannot tell me this is not similar to Game of Thrones if you do not agree with this sentiment. Oh god, you might be as conflicted and confused as Dan and Dave were at the end of season 8, when they kind of forgot how to write.
Today we mourn the loss of a great man, but...
Two things I want to point out. Yes, this is very much a enhanced version of what the drug culture is in London. Obviously being pushed up to the point where it's like the gangs have a lot more power. But that voice sounds very similar to the pirate Salvador Salazar, or whatever his name was from Game of Thrones, played by Lucian Mismati. I wonder how many Game of Thrones actors are going to be in this.
Tomorrow it will be business as usual.
No.
Everything stops until I find out who killed him.
Interesting. My theory was correct. So Joe Cole, who played the main character from Peaky Blinders, I still haven't finished that TV show, is the son of this gang leader or leader of this alliance of all the major gangs, it seems. And now that he's been killed, Joe Cole's a leader, and he's like, I'm going to stop everything until I find out who killed him. Now, my assumption is this is going to cause a big rift in this alliance. Because obviously if business stops, the gang leaders don't make their money. If the gang leaders don't make their money, the alliance crumbles. he allows his emotions to take control, and well, that's the major conflict in the series. Interesting.
There was a time when nobody would have dared touch this family.
Cat.
Your Grace.
Michelle Fairley is in this, and she's the mother in this as well. It's like she's born to play like widows. Like she was the mother of Robb Stark, and now she's the mother of Joe Cole's character. Interesting. The same way that Sean Bean always plays characters that get killed, Michelle Fairley always plays the widow. Ah, this is going to be hilarious. Will there be some sort of red wedding in this series? Oh, God knows there will be.
I'm going to make things right, Mum.
That confirms it.
Sean Wallace himself tasking me to find the guy who killed his father.
So this guy seems to be the B-plot's main character, so the secondary main character. And I feel like he's going to end up being featured a lot. That's usually what they do in trailers. They will usually have a guy like this portrayed heavily in it. This guy is meant to be hunting down Joe Cole's father. And obviously he's going to have his own plotline, his own thread to go through. God knows what that will be. That'll probably be explained later on in this. Perhaps he owes Joe Cole's father a debt or something, or maybe he's really tight with the Coles. I'm calling them Coles because we don't know the character's family name. But I kind of get Jon Snow vibes from this guy. So perhaps he ends up being a main character later on. Just a theory. Yep, this is definitely the new Jon Snow, and I like it. I mean, I don't know if this is realistic choreography. I mean, I feel like a lot of them would be grouped up instead of all being 1-versus-1 fights, but I tell you what, this looks bloody amazing. I mean, that's one way to take some bloke down, isn't it? Just break his spinal cord. Choke slam!
He's the twat that tore up the pub.
Elliot.
You did all that on your own? What was it, 6 of them?
Or 8. But I had a dart, so...
Now here's one thing I loved about Game of Thrones. Despite it being mainly a drama fantasy, it had elements of other genres within it. Whether it be small comedic moments, the horror of the White Walkers that ended up being shit, or the mysteries or political intrigue, whatever. Can Gangs of London achieve this? Can Sky achieve this? Something that HBO struggled to do. Something that, in the case of The Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, and other shows, AMC has struggled to do with. Can the writing remain consistently good? Can it have a great flow? Can themes be used efficiently without becoming a detriment to the plot, a la The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker? Will they insert forced identity politics and other political agendas into it, like Westworld? These are the questions that people need to ask, because from what I've seen so far, Gangs of London looks very promising. But you know how Hollywood is.
My father was taken from us on the streets of London.
I do have questions as to the world building. London is one of the most surveyed cities on the planet. How would a massive criminal syndicate develop without the police or SCO-19 or hell, the SAS or something intervening and stopping it? Because these criminals look heavily armed. I'm seeing MP7s, MP5s, there's probably a couple M4s, or it wouldn't surprise me if I see an LMG, an M249 or something in there. For you gun nuts who are watching, you know what I'm talking about. I'm seeing heavy ordnance here. Will it be realistic? Because for you Americans out there, we do not have the Second Amendment. Guns are not legal the same way they are in the States, unless you have a license, and even then it is screened heavily, and you can't even own these types of firearms. Perhaps this is something to do with the political side of it. Who knows? I guess we'll see.
And now London will deliver to us those that took him.
Now, I'm not sure about how realistic this choreography is, I've already said. But it does look very amazing. It looks flashy, it looks fun, it looks dangerous.
We are making enemies out of business partners.
In that sequence, it seems like this bloke and this bloke end up working together. Perhaps those blokes with the black vans and the heavy ordnance were sent by Joe Cole's character. Perhaps he believes that this guy was the guy who killed his father, and this guy, whether or not he was the guy who actually did it, helps him out, and they end up being the guys to betray the major faction that Joe Cole's character represents. I could be wrong, but whether or not I am, it intrigues me heavily.
We're going to find a peaceful solution to this.
I'm not interested in peace.
And Joe Cole, on his vendetta to get revenge for his father, ends up going against his right-hand man, or his father's right-hand man, who's like his advisor or something. And ends up causing a massive rift in his own circle because of his emotions, clouding his judgment. This is the most well-lit street in London I have ever seen in my life. Hollywood, what have you done?
What kind of trouble you in?
Right, some backstory on the secondary main character. It seems that his father isn't really aware, and it's like he's the son that's gotten into life that his father didn't want him to go down almost. I like it.
If you knew what I was doing, you'd be proud of me.
I see him! Get Sean out of here now!
Well, we have his name now. His name is Sean. Reminds me of Sean Bean, and seeing as Sean Bean's characters are always dying, I'm predicting that he dies. Oh. Again, in the streets of London, how are there no police to be seen? Do they have that much influence where they can just have the police just ignore all the explosions and gunshots?
Once you enter this world,
So this is the first we're seeing the police in this, it seems. Or at least I think it's the police. They're out of focus. Can't really tell. But let's assume that it is. How on earth is something like this happening in London?
you can build an empire.
It's very weird that we have to go to another show and universe to experience something resembling Lady Stoneheart, don't you think? And when looking at this sequence, I have a feeling that Lucian Mismati's character is definitely going to become some sort of either anti-hero or villain in this series.
You can be a king.
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
And that is the trailer for Gangs of London. Now some thoughts and words and whatnot. We've all seen amazing TV shows, films, and even games start off amazingly well and over time degrade into something unfathomable. I've already brought up examples, I'm not going to say them again because I'm getting annoyed just saying them. I can only imagine how annoyed you would be listening. Now the things that are going through my head are, should I even invest my time and essence into this TV show? Because it could just as easily fail like the ones that come before. Yeah, screw it, I'll bring them up. Star Wars ended horrifically. Game of Thrones ended horrifically. The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead have decreased in quality substantially. Star Wars The Mandalorian went down in quality as the episodes went on. Westworld got woke and went broke. The same can be said for Doctor Who. Power became mediocre at the end. I hear Star Trek Picard went south as well. The anime One Punch Man's second season was heavily mediocre in contrast to the first. On the topic of games, Halo, as 343 took over, decreased in value substantially as well, relying on expanded universe materials to build up the story and fill the gaps. There have been so many films, TV shows and games that have just subverted our expectations, I guess I could say, to the point where it's even inspired me to actually start writing my own stuff, whether it be a TV show, a game, or YouTube content. We'll see what happens in my personal life, but whilst I'm on YouTube, I shall continue to point out the good, the bad, and the ugly in these industries, because so many money-making machines are pumping out subpar, low-quality content and expecting us to pay full price for it, whether it be through Netflix subscriptions, Amazon Prime subscriptions, paying for our Skybox, HBO subscriptions, Disney Plus, whatever. And yet, I still continue to watch them. I guess I'm some sort of masochist, aren't I? We'll see how well Gangs of London goes. I'm going to prepare my next video since we're all at home because of the Rona. And I guess I'll see you in the next one, lads and ladettes. Cheers.